In this lecture, we're going to talk about the semantics of the way that brand names are chosen and the kinds of things that go into labeling foods. Just to begin with, let's just have a look at some examples of the kinds of labels you find on olive oil, and it's usually branded as being Italian olive oil. So here's a particular label of a brand called Salvadori, and we can see that it's Italian by the sound of the name. And as we'll also see, the kind of image there in the background of what looks to be a very voluptuous peasant woman climbing a tree to pick the olives. And we'll see that in other products which are putatively Italian. And notice it's written in Italian, olio di oliva vergine, which suggests that it's a special kind of olive oil. And if you look at the label there at the back, it says Salvadori, and it says Italian, and it says product of Italy. Okay, and then there's a bit of a story about the olive oil. What we find in most labeling of olive oil is that it's rather misleading. So here's an olive oil called olive oil, and it's got an Italian flag, as you can see. That's the logo. And as a particular brand name, Fresh Finds. Fresh is important in terms of suggesting that it is authentic and fresh. And also relates to a erstwhile, they don't exist anymore. It's a Whole Foods chain. Well, I should say they do exist. They still continue to exist. It's a famous Whole Foods chain called Fresh Fields. And as you can see, the product description, 100% naturally imported from Italy. If you look at the back of that, what you find is even more stuff. Olive oil is the taste of the Italian lifestyle. And then in small print, when you look at ingredients, extra virgin olive oil, okay. And then notice what we get below, imported from Italy. Contains extra virgin olive oils from Italy, Spain, and Greece. We don't know what percentage of oil comes from Italy, but we know it's not completely Italian. But notice how it's been presented as being Italian, which is accepted as being the premium olive oil. Let's look at another example. And there you again, you see, this is Di Cecco, and you'll see the typical representation in terms of images of an Italian peasant, quote unquote peasant woman, very voluptuous woman, and she's it's harvest time, and so she's the goddess of nature, bringing in all the good stuff. Okay, but again, you know, when we look closely at it, we find that not all the oils come from Italy. We can talk about the branding triangle, in which we have a brand name, like Di Cecco, or the other types of Salvadori, the other types of olive oil we've just looked at. We have a product logo, and with Italian olive oil, it tends to be a very similar type of logo, which represents a certain kind of stereotypical view of what an Italian peasant was, highly voluptuous woman. And then we also have product design and product packaging, and that would be the shape of the bottle, etc. And so we can look at this branding triangle and look at how it's integrated. Here's an example from of a particular cookie, and the brand name is Abbracci. And I'm looking at examples in Italian. I'm basing a lot of the particular examples on the article by Zilch. It's not a required reading; it is an optional reading, but you can look at it. And I'm taking a lot of the kinds of things I talk about in this lecture from that particular article. So we can identify a brand name, Abbracci, which in Italian means an embrace, or better, a hug. And then we can look at the logo, and we have the Molino Bianco, the white mill. And we have a white mill in Athens, of course. And it's a kind of a throwback. It's a retro notion of purity in terms of a mill, probably by a river, with a water-driven wheel grinding the corn, the wheat. Of course, this is doesn't exist, of course, but it exists very strongly in our mental representation of what we think about in terms of authenticity and purity, in terms of the grinding of corn, wheat, and other grains. And then we also have the product design, which could be the packaging or the actual product itself. And we can see that it's a kind of a chocolate hearth and then a vanilla hearth, which are joined together in the notion of a hug. Okay, and we can also look at product description. So we have the the branding triangle together with product description. And what we have is lots and lots of language and lots of representations in terms of packaging and logos, which carry a total message. So this is the product description in Italian. Gli abbracci Molino Bianco, il piacere unico di due biscotti insieme, etc., etc. And if we look at the translation of that, and we have sweet emotions with every single bite, a breakfast full of tenderness. The Italians eat these kinds of cookies for breakfast with their coffee, which feels new every time. Be caressed by abbracci, ideal for you and your family. So we have some key words there in terms of emotions, tenderness, caressed, which are very sensual notions. And we also have other notions of family. So that product description, together with the elements of the branding triangle, all together are pretty powerful ways in which products advertise, and they're powerful ways and they affect us when we're walking down the aisle and we're looking to buy something. So what we're going to do is have a look at some of the semantics that go into the way that brand names are chosen and presented to us. So the first element that we're going to look at is what we can call the graphic structure of brand names. In other words, portmanteau words. And portmanteau words are words which tend to be two words which are put together in a particular way. So have a look at these particular, first two are Italian words. And so we have this word fagolosi, which is actually a combination of two words in Italian, favolosi, which means fabulous, and golosi, which is sweet tooth or tasty. So you put together favolosi and golosi, and you combine them together into a portmanteau word, which is fagolosi. Here's an example from English. You have two words, gigantic, and you have enormous, and you put those together, taking the gi and the normous, and you get ginormous, and that's a portmanteau word, or working on the graphic structure of the two words. Another word that you're probably familiar with is frappuccino, which is not an Italian word. It's an English word. It comes from frappe or frap, which in the Boston area of the United States refers to a milkshake. And we also have the word cappuccino. So a chain of coffee bars in the Boston area, which was called Coffee Connection, invented the word frappuccino, a combination of a milkshake and a cappuccino, and invented the word frappuccino, which was eventually, of course, that particular chain was bought out by Starbucks, and that's what you're seeing as a major brand name, which is offered by Starbucks. Just below that, you can have a look at some of the some more examples, and different ways in which we can play around with the orthography of these combinations of words. So the first example is the omission of particular parts of the writing. All right, so of the spelling of these words. So we have big fruit, and notice the I has been taken out, or break, and the A has been taken out, and then here's an Italian example, Forini, which is the shorter version of Fourier. We can also substitute particular graphemes or letters. So we have Baby Rizzo, which is an Italian brand name, and the baby, of course, stands for baby. And notice it's really an English word which has been rewritten and put together with an Italian word. So baby rice, baby riso. The second example is Lavazza deck, and of course the deck refers to decaffeinated. Lavazza is the name of the coffee brand. Then we have pan brioche, and the second word there, brioche. Notice the way that has been spelt. Brioche is the French word which is used in Italian to describe a croissant, but notice the spelling is different. And then you have the substitution and the omission of particular letters or graphemes. So we have Grand Biscuit, which is biscuit, okay, and then other ones you've got there are Kier and Sneck. Notice Sneck is the Italian kind of play on words of the English snack. Okay, so there you have particular ways that brand names are produced by a play on words in which particular brand names are spelled differently. They're played about to create these particular names. So a second kind of semantic tool of brand naming is the use of suffixes. Suffixes is part of the general idea of affixation. So a suffix tends to come towards the end of a word. So have a look at this, some of the Italian diminutive forms, and you're probably familiar with these if you think of pasta, for example. So ello and etto and ini. So ello is tagliatelle, which is a diminutive. Spaghetti is the word etto, and it's of course pluralized to etti. Then ini, prosciuttini. We know what prosciutto is, ham. So the ini suggests little ham. And then ollo and otto, cremolo, manicotti. And then, of course, you can have a combination of these two particular diminutive forms. So ello and ina, forellino, and etto and ino, bruschettini. That would be the Italian pronunciation. English pronunciation would be bruschettini. Those are called diminutives, which are often affectionate, of course, and so they're kind of terms of endearment, and that's probably why those terms are used so often. You can also have the opposite of a diminutive, which is called an augmentation, means something that's bigger. So riga is one particular size. Rigatone, the one means big, so big riga, big types of pasta. And you can also have the superlative, issimo. So pomodorissimo is a word which describes a particular brand of tomato sauce in Italy. So those are all examples of suffixes, words that are attached to a particular root part of the name. And if we want to look at English, a very common brand name suffix is EX, and here's a few examples of them. So in medicine we have Celebrex and various other names, Lipex, Sominex. Toiletries we have Blistex, Carmex, Cudex, Durex, Cotex, then pesticides, Lavex, etc. And artifacts, a whole list of those, Pyrex, Timex, remember the watch is a Timex, a Rolex, which is of course connotates something luxurious. And then a lot of X's with cleaning agents, for example, Tilex is the picture, and then for cleaning windows, Windex, etc., etc. Not many X's with food, especially not many X's used as a suffix with two-syllable food words. So we can also have prefixes. We looked at suffixes. Another form of affixation is prefixes. So these are particular morphemes that go before the main particular root name of the products. So in the first one there, the main name is Cirio, and then the prefix is super Cirio. And then cereale is the main word, and the prefix is gran, or big. You can see this in English with a suffix which is used a lot, of course, by McDonald's, and that, of course, is Mac. So they put Mac as a prefix to lots and lots of their products. So you have McNuggets, McRib, McWrap, and, of course, McMuffin. Another very common one is Nutri as a prefix, Nutri-Grain, Nutri-Life, Nutri-Thin, Nutri-Express. Very common prefix. Another kind of semantic device that's used in brand name creation is the notion of apocope. Apocope is the way that words are shortened. So the loss of one or more sounds from the end of a word, and especially the loss of an unstressed vowel. So some of these you're very familiar with. You're probably not familiar with the notion of apocope, but you're familiar with the way that we can derive photo from photograph. So that's a shortening of the word photograph to photo. Credibility can be shortened to cred. We talk about your street creds. And of course, the word barbecue, especially in Australian English, is shortened to Barbie. In Spanish, the word grande, meaning big, can be shortened to gran. And also in Italian, the same thing happens. Similarly, with the Spanish word bueno is shortened to bue, and in Italian buono is shortened to buon. Buongiorno is a shortening. So buon is an example of apocope. And also in Italian, of course, uno is shortened to un before a particular nouns that begin with vowels. So that's apocope. Syncope is not the shortening of syllables at the end of a word, but the shortening of syllables or sounds in the interior of a word. Okay, especially the loss of an unstressed vowel. So some examples in English, of course, would be never, which is often, well, in poetic terms, shortened to ne. Worcester, of course, is not Worcester, but Worcester. And Gloucester is not Gloucester, but Gloucester, or Gloucester, if you come from that town just to the north of Chansey. Another example, of course, would be contractions like did not is shortened to didn't. Okay, so syncope refers to the way that sounds, internal syllables are shortened, not syllables at the end of the word. Have a look at some examples from Italian. So we have patafette, which is a combination of patata and fetta, so that's potato and slice. And so you can see how the sounds in the middle of those are shortened to get to patafette. Also with fresco and mare, fresh sea becomes fresco frubetto, frutto, and sorbetto, so the sounds in the middle of those are shortened to frubetto. So those are examples from Italian. You can perhaps imagine or think about a lot of examples. The same kind of thing happens, of course, in English. So what we're looking at some of these semantic ways in which brand names are created. Another particular device is Haplology. Yeah, that's a kind of a fancy name. What does it mean? Well, it means the elimination of a syllable when two consecutive identical or similar syllables occur. In fact, haplology is an example of haplology. We probably say not haplology, but hapology. Have a look at an example there which probably better explains that. Pierced ear earrings. We don't say pierced ear earrings. Notice the ear is repeated. We have two sounds, they're duplicated. When we have that duplication of sound, we tend to drop one of those duplications. So we don't say pierced ear earrings, we say pierced earrings. And of course, if you look at that literally, it suggests that the earrings are pierced. Well, of course, it's not the earrings that are pierced, it's the ear that's pierced, but we don't say that. More commonly, if you look at words like library, notice the duplication of the sounds. We don't say library, okay? We tend to say library. We don't say February. We tend to say, we drop one of those sounds. We have the ru and the r, so we say February. And similarly with particularly, okay? And there's some examples in Italian of haplology. Often these words are difficult to say. That's why these similar types, duplication of similar sounds are kind of, one of them is dropped. So one example is there's the combination of natura and ricci becomes natoricci, right? So if you notice the sounds there, we have ra and ri, which are similar, so that's how we drop the ra and get to the natoricci. Another way of looking at brand names and how they come about is the notion of composition. That is, what kinds of parts of speech are put together to make the particular brand names. So a very common way of doing this is putting together two nouns, right? Or a noun and an adjective. So I've given you some Italian um, examples there. So we have conofiore, which is cone and flower, and then noun plus an adjective. Amica verde, a green friend. Amica friend verde is the adjective. Then we got adjective plus noun. Italian adjectives can go either before or after. They tend to go more often after, but they can go before. So adjective plus noun would be dolci fiocchi, um, sweet flakes, for example. And then a verb plus noun, some examples there. And then lots of other examples of the way that we can combine different parts of speech. Adjective plus adjective, fresco, tenero, fresh, tender, etc. And so these are examples taken from Italian, and you can begin to think as you look at some of those examples there. Shake and bake is coordination. Shake and bake. Our sweet tarts, of course, is a combination of adjective and noun. So that's another way of looking at how we can look at how brand names arrived by the composition of the parts of speech that go together with them. Another source for looking at brand names is to look at what are called the semantic fields, or to be more exact, the donor fields. So we look in terms of particular areas that are most commonly used to derive brand names, and they tend to be, as we can see here, things like family, religion, tenderness, music, botany, animals, etc. So these are some of the classic particular donor fields which tend to be associated with particular types of food. The example there of the pictures, of course, is these are all brand names derived from the donor field of the family. Mrs. Fields, Uncle Ben's, Dad's root beer, Aunt Jemima, and Nonna Isa. That's an Italian brand meaning grandmother. Nonna is grandmother, grandmother Isa. And we've also already looked at some of the donor fields for some of the biscuits that we looked at, which tended to take the names from tenderness, for example. And of course, lots of brand names are taken from words to do with music. One other thing to look at is the notion of information in brand names. And we can look at this information under lots of different particular types. So product type, product components, product properties. And there you can see a whole list of things like the shape, the size, the preparation, the tradition, and those are all examples taken from Italian, which are based on those particular properties. And you can begin to sort of look at those particular categories and begin to think of words in English that go with them, of course, right? So Jiffy Pop suggests ease of preparation. Newman's O's, which suggests something to do with tradition, and of course you have the name of Newman, of course, which gives it authenticity. Land of Lakes, which is a place name, or provenance. That's where that particular butter comes from. Okay, and then finally, let's have a look at the use of foreign languages in brand names. Again, you've been given a list of the kinds of foreign words which are used in Italian. So, for example, there you have the word joy, or spray pan, or Nutella, creamy, and even Benz, right? Which are all words derived from English, which are used in Italian brand names. Or you can see influences from French and from Latin, and from Greek and German, etc. If you think of English brand names, then also you have a lot of influence of foreign languages. So Nescafe, the cafe, of course, is derived from French. Doritos, which suggests it's derived from Spanish. And of course, Häagen-Dazs, which is originally Danish. So there's just a few examples of how an understanding of semantics and how semantics works can help you understand how brand names are derived.